Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. With that being said, brought to you by the Brothers Blue. Tonight, we have a very special edition because we are hosting Stephen from BG Cast and Andrew from Heavyweights Light Fields. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I know that we've been trying to do this, so I'm very happy for us to be able to get together and collaborate. So, what we're going to talk about is capitalism, maybe solutions, and capitalism maybe versus collectivism. And hopefully, we can also just kind of have an organic flow to the conversation with us just trying to find areas of common ground and compromise. I'm sorry, that was the other thing I wanted to just say is that we have some compromises that we think we might be ready to bring to the table and talk about. So, with that being said, that is Brother Kyle.
And that is Brother Cody. And that is Stephen and Andrew. And again, we are so happy to be hosting you guys. And the first compromise that I want to offer, I guess, might actually be a slight disappointment. Because in all of the reading that I've been doing, ultimately, the conclusion that I've come to is that capitalism is the best wealth generating economic system in history, and so. Again, I keep going back to the capitalist realism theory by Mark Fisher, I think, is the guy that wrote that book. But ultimately, the idea is that we can't really. It's easier to imagine the end of the world or the end of the collapse of society than what a post-capitalist system would actually look like.
Okay. Real quick, guys, let me I'm having an issue with my camera. Let me hop back out and then hop back in. I'll be right back. Andrew, do you want to take the lead on that? And I will be right back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that book, but I wrote it down, so I'll check it out. I wasn't prepared for that. Yeah, compromise. So that's where we started. And then we moved to, you think capitalism is the best for wealth generation?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start back off with this. So what was the question again? You guys were talking about capitalism. Okay, and what was the question again? I'm sorry, I was having some technical difficulties on my end.
I think it's easier to imagine the end of the world than imagining what a post-capitalist society would actually look like.
Well, one of the biggest things I'm gonna have to squash right here is I think a really big issue this collective has at this point in time is they're mistaking what we have right now as true capitalism. And I think this is the biggest misconception that we have. Of course, we've all been conditioned to believe that what we have here in the United States is actually real capitalism, but actually what it is it's crony capitalism. So let's go ahead and do this real quick, guys. This is just something that I hear constantly from both sides of the bipartisan spectrum. I hear the right claiming that we are a capitalist country. All right. And I hear the left having its issues with capitalism and thinks capitalism is the issue with the world that we're having today. So real quick, I'm going to go ahead and just for the sake of educational purposes, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share this definition, and we're going to go over these two definitions between capitalism and crony capitalism. And there's another huge misconception that what we're in is late stage capitalism. We're not in something called late stage capitalism, at least in my opinion. We're currently in what I would call crony capitalism, and how crony capitalism actually came to be was back when corporations began to get the same rights as people. Okay, this is where it really started to come into full swing. So I'm going to pull up this page real quick. If you guys want to share that, let's kind of just you'll see it down in the bottom here. Just hit present. Cool. So what we have here.
Can I interject? Can I interject?
Absolutely. Go right ahead. Yeah, go right ahead.
Because we've actually had this conversation before, and you and I agreed that it's crony capitalism and corporate capitalism are essentially the same thing. And I think I think you're correct in the summation that that's what we're currently suffering under.
But do I feel that it's easier to envision the end of the world and not envision the end of a capitalist society? Well, you have to, I guess, at least from my point of view. What I'm going to say is this: is right now, from the grand scheme of things, because of human psychology, right? Because you guys know this, and you guys have been on my show before. You guys know that I really ride off of a lot of human psychology, human nature, and the nature of governments, because we cannot debunk, we cannot debate, and we cannot discount these things. They are what they are. And there's really nothing else we can really stem from that. We can't debate human nature and human psychology. Human nature and human psychology are constituents in our collective mentality. And we can't really debate the psychology of governments either. Because governments have maintained what I would call a very similar psychology since they've been around, since the dawn of governments. And when we take into account removing a capitalist system from our country at this point in time, right now, I'm going to say this: when we look at the government, we look at the psychology of our government right now, and we look at the psychology of the human collective in general as a whole. Okay, we are not in any way, shape, or form morally, ethically, mentally, emotionally, and for a lack of better words, everything, ready to kind of just do away with a capitalist system. And that's why I can understand where your question's coming from, in the aspect of, you feel like it's easier for people to envision the world at the end of the world, but not envision the end of a capitalist system here in the United States of America. It's because right now, doing away with a capitalist system, or at least a system that has, some resemblance to what I would call laissez-faire capitalism, which is actually capitalism in its truest nature, would actually do a benefit for us, at least in my eyes, to kind of reset some of the things that are going on in the crony capitalist state. And that's why, you see a lot of people like Andrew and I, like, we lean, even though we're anarchists, we lean more towards a ANCAP stance when it comes to certain things, even though I have my opinions about, anarcho-capitalism and certain things about it as well. I mean, I don't agree with every aspect of the philosophy, but this is why I think it's easier for people to envision the end of the world than envision that, because we would be talking about a complete overhaul of everything that, that Americans have gotten used to. And I feel personally at this point in time, don't get me wrong, I want the overhaul. Like I want the overhaul. Like, I do think we do need an overhaul here when it comes to this. But I also feel at the same time, like we have an entire collective that we're we're dealing with at this point in time as well. And what works best for the select few doesn't always work best for the entire collective, at least in a short-term response like that, when it comes to overhauling the system completely. It's got to be done in like a stair-step method. But this is why I think and I'll digress and end it on this. This is why I think it's easier for people to envision the end of the world and instead of the end of capitalism. It's due to the conditioning also that this system has placed on us. But I'll leave it at that.
Do you want to read your definition?
Yeah, so let's go ahead. I mean, well, I just want to do this. I know we've had this conversation before.
No, because it's funny. It's almost exactly the same as the definition from my economics textbook. And
it should be. They should be the same.
Yeah, so I'll read that one if that's okay.
So actually, let's do this one, man, because I think this one is going to. So let's do laissez-faire, because this is actually the purest, the purest form of.
That's an opinion. Why can't we just go back to the definition of capitalism?
We can go back to the definition of capitalism. That's fine. We can go back there. I was just saying it's laissez-faire capitalism is actually the purest form of capitalism. But let's go ahead here. We got capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production and their use for the purpose of obtaining profit. This socioeconomic system has developed historically through several stages and is defined by a number of basic constituent elements: private property, profit motive, capital accumulation, competitive markets, commodification, wage labor, and an emphasis on innovation and economic growth. Capitalist economies tend to experience a business cycle of economic growth followed by recessions. We see that pretty much going on here. And we have. So let's go over here. This is just the thing. What were you going to say? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I would like to deconstruct the first sentence.
Okay, let's go.
It's a definition. Like, there's nothing in the first sentence that mentions markets whatsoever. It is deep within the second sentence.
Hold on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, because in the first sentence it says private ownership. And so this is something I actually wanted to chime in and say is Andrew had a guest on his show and he accurately described that we have a mixed economy, because that's the truth. For most things, we have both a private option and a public option. So that, by definition, makes that a mixed commodity. Education is a good example of where America has a mixed economy, because we have public and private options for education. Healthcare is another one where the economy is absolutely mixed. And then one where I think is fun that we can drill down on, because it does not have a public option, and that's housing. Housing is the only thing that we have only a private option for. We do not have a public option for housing.
I get what you're saying on that. Well,
that's not entirely true.
Okay.
You can live on BLM land, the Bureau of Land Management land. There you can live on that land for free. There's various regulations you have to follow, but BLM land is free use for such things.
Do you know the percentage of population that live on BLM land?
Very, very little. But I guess I want to ask, like, what's your point?
Housing is the only commodity that we have that's only private options.
That's not true either, I don't think. But, like, what are you getting at?
What I just said.
You stated a fact.
Yep. The housing market is a commodity that we have no public option for. We only have private options for housing.
No, and I mean there's some public housing, but it could be improved.
Thank you.
Section 8. Have you ever heard of Section
Yeah.
8?
Exactly. There's public housing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, well. It's also, the one thing I'm going to add on that too is I got to look up the statistics for the BLM land, but I do know that you are allowed to live on BLM land. But I mean, like, exactly, I'm going to kind of write on what Andrew's saying is what are we getting at by here? Because at the same time, like, I understand what you guys are trying to pitch, but there has to be some kind of reciprocation going on. It's not because what happens if we make everything a public commodity, like you guys are saying, is the government then the government has control over all of that then, if that's the case, and then what you're doing is we're kind of opening a door to what I would at least call a removal of personal sovereignty, because if the government is in control of everything, because you have to think if something is public, that's why one of the biggest reasons why housing is private is because that's your private property, that's your home, that's where you are allowed to have that peace of mind, that sanctuary, that place for you to have that sovereignty. But what happens if we make we make housing a very huge public issue? I mean, like, and as Andrew's saying too, there is Section 8. There are public housing options, but when you look at Section 8, have you guys ever lived in a Section 8 housing complex before?
I lived in 3 trailers growing up, so yeah.
You lived in 3 trailers, okay, but like, what were these trailers privately owned? Like, did you guys own these trailers? Did you guys rent them? Because then, even if
You rented.
you rented, so, but still, then under that too, you're looking at the housing being a private thing still under rental, even though you're going with a landlord, and you have to follow the guidelines of the landlord, which could be whatever. At that point in time, most landlords don't even really have guidelines. If we're looking at it from a statistic, there's basic guidelines, but for the people who have lived in Section 8 housing, there's a lot of government rules and regulations that come with having to live in that public housing. So, I mean, there's a reason why there are things that are private, I guess you could say, in that aspect, because when you have that private sector of things, you relinquish that government interference. You know what I mean? And that's at least my perspective on it. But there are opportunities, and there are things for people to receive public housing. You just have to follow these guidelines, and you have to follow these government regulations.
Well, to move to a different topic, I really do think it's a little more nuanced, and we should try to understand, like, that is the situation with most things, because I go to a food bank consistently, but I also go to restaurants consistently. Like, that is literally like the definition of both public and private, and it's like this is something that can both be a commodity and a necessity.
Correct.
Absolutely. I can understand what you guys are saying there. The number one thing I think that you guys are getting at here is, let me just go out on a limb and say this, is you guys are talking about the issues with capitalism. Is that what we're kind of bringing to the table at this point in time?
I really just wanted to go over the definition of it, but that's all.
No, that's fine. We can go over the definition of it. I mean, and that. Well,
Can I
go
jump
ahead.
in?
Yeah, of course, Andrew. Go ahead. Yeah.
This has been incredibly boring. No offense, Stephen. I think something I want to bring up, and I'm not saying you are boring, Stephen, just this whole thing. One thing, while we're trying to talk about capitalism, coming at it from different perspectives, that I see the left doing is demonizing the concept of profit. Profit in general is bad. And so maybe that's an area we could focus on discussing. Is profit inherently bad? Should people be allowed to profit? If not, what would it look like to prevent profit while still being productive?
I like
That
that. I like that.
okay.
Roll,
Sorry.
no, dude. I know you're all good, man. Don't worry about it. Freaking but no, I think that's a good way to kind of segue this combo. But the number one thing I just wanted to bring up this definition because this is something both the left and the right, um, seems like they've lost touch with it. Like they don't 100% understand what real capitalism is, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, just for the viewers who are watching this, because we know how we hear from the left a lot, that it's capitalism's fault. It's capitalism's fault. Capitalism is the way, is the reason why things are the way they are today. So that's kind of where I wanted to bring that up. And I mean, real fast before we hop on with Andrew's topic here, let's just go ahead and do this one, crony capitalism. So I mean, right here you can see that this is and for the viewers who are watching this, I just want you to compare these two definitions. So we have crony capitalism, sometimes also called simply cronyism, is a pejorative term used in political discourse to describe a situation in which businesses profit from a close relationship with state power, either through an anti-competitive regulatory environment, direct government largesse, or corruption. Examples given from crony capitalism include obtainment of permits, government grants, tax breaks, or other undue influence from businesses over the state's deployment of public goods, for example, mining concessions for primary commodities or contracts for public works. In other words, it is used to describe a situation where businesses thrive not as a result of free enterprise, but rather collusion between a business class and the political class. So that's just something I wanted to bring to the table, because this is an argument, or this is something I've, at least in my eyes, I've heard absolutely enough of, because what we can see, case in point here, is that the left doesn't understand what real capitalism is, and both the left and the right don't understand what real capitalism is. And this is just something I want to squash here and now, that it's not capitalism's fault the way things are, for the reason the way things are when it comes to a lot of the economical struggles that we face here. It's actually cronyism's fault, at least in my eyes, for a lot of the issues that the left has with the current economic paradigm that we're in. And I'm not just harping on the left with this too. I'm harping on the right as well, because the right doesn't even understand what real capitalism is anymore. We hear people like Charlie Kirk, we hear people like Matt Walsh, we hear people like Ben Shapiro, freaking talking about how capitalism this and capitalism that, but when we really look at the grand scheme of things, we don't really have true capitalism here in the United States anymore. If anything, it's still on just a very small scale. It's on a very small personal level at this point. What we do have taking over, I mean, if we had real capitalism here in the United States, why would you not see a lot of smaller businesses becoming bigger businesses? Why do you see the Walmarts shutting down all of these mom and pop shops and things like that? So this is just something I want to bring to the table. And just to clear up some things. But let's kind of segue into Andrew's point of the conversation, as he was saying, like, so it seems like the left is against profit. So let's
Steven,
kind of.
do you want me to stop sharing?
Oh yeah, I can stop for you, man. You're good. Yeah. So
Oh.
the left is seemingly against profit, as Andrew brought up. So let's hear it from you guys real quick. Are you guys against profit yourselves?
Well,
So the idea is the demonization of profit, right, Andrew?
Yes.
Right. And so, first of all, I'd say that's a non sequitur because we literally have not said that term or used that term in any of our communications leading up to this. So it's not
I was
something
just
that I'm
okay.
prepared to talk about. So that makes it a non sequitur. It's a
Okay.
subject that we haven't talked about talking about. It's the demonization of profit, which I am not for, by the way.
Okay. Cool. Cool. That's fine. No,
And then,
I wasn't making the accusation
You
that you were. I was
misinterpreted
just.
that entirely. As advocates of progressive ideology,
no, it's
I
just
was implying that that is something I see your side do, and I would like to get your input on that.
That's exactly what I was saying. I was not making an accusation that you two are demonizing profit. We just want to get your thoughts on that. That's exactly what I meant.
I see this as we're two people as advocates for two different sides of this culture war, right? And so I ask you a question to speak to something that they do, and I was hoping you would ask us questions as to speak to things that our side does.
okay, so what I would say is, do you think that coercion is necessarily bad? Because as a father and a teacher, I consistently have to coerce people into doing the right thing.
Okay, so give us some examples on that.
Literally, classroom management, like getting students to
sit down, not talk, do anything, be quiet, whatever.
exactly. It's a classroom management thing. Again, you're coercing people to do the right thing.
Okay, well,
I see that as you're leading them to engage in proper conduct. If you have to physically restrain them, you need to explore not being a teacher, because you should not put your hands on unruly. Well, you should defend
Do you
yourself.
think I'm doing that, Andrew?
It's like, what the hell are you talking about?
Seriously.
it's
You're using the word coercion, which is a very direct word. If you're not physically intervening with someone and you are engaging in conversation with them, you are using persuasion and communication. You are not coercing them. Coercion is force. So you're using a bad definition of the word coercion.
So
Yeah.
I was also going to throw in there too. You're dealing with a massive gray area also there, and that's just something I'm throwing in on my end for that, because you're dealing with you're dealing with individuals who are psychologically also in a state of rebellion. It's natural for children to want to rebel, especially at a certain age against authority. And so I'm gonna kind of side with Andrew on that. Is you're not coercing them, you're persuading them to do these things for the betterment of themselves. But also on top of that as well,
It
one of
feels
the
like
biggest
coercion when I'm doing it.
I can understand why you feel that way for sure. But the other thing too, kind of even touching on this, I was actually talking with Andrew about this before the show, is so it's also having the mentality of you're not going to be able to save everybody in this world. I mean, you're not going to be able to persuade everybody to do the right thing. I mean, now we start kind of really diving into philosophy, and we start diving into kind of like objectivism a little bit. Like, is objective is being morally good an objective thing, or is it a subjective thing? So I would say, like, you're trying to persuade them to do the right thing. Do I think coercing people is right? Absolutely not. However, what's really interesting about that is everybody is has their own free will. So even diving into that
Hold
portion of the
on.
ball as
You
well.
guys are saying that you don't think somebody can be coerced into doing the right thing.
I'm not saying that somebody can't be coerced into doing the right thing. I'm saying that I don't agree with coercion.
Okay.
Andrew, you got anything? Was that?
I'll wrap my mind around that one.
Yeah, just think on that, I guess. And when I think of coercion, I think of force, right? Um, yeah, and then that's where the gray area of non-aggression comes in, where what does one person interpret as an aggression or as an act of aggression? We could go really wild here and talk about like trans things, right? Um, there are, dead naming someone could be seen as an act of aggression, right? So that's not a physical, forceful thing, but it is something that has created a very unpleasant experience within another human. So that's like a really good gray area of not using the word coercion, but aggression. I like that word because it fits. The non-aggression principle is an anarchist principle. And
And
some
I
people,
like, yeah, I love the non-aggression principle, and I love what Steven said about is more being morally good, subjective or objective, like that right there. Sorry, that's a truth bomb right there. Is it subjective or is it objective? Like being morally good, that's just kind of what I try to do every day. But who's to say the things that I do are good deeds, right?
Well, where I'm coming from on that too is, like, there was actually a thought experiment that was done. Shit, what was it, back in the, I want to say, the early '80s. I don't remember exactly all of it off the top of my head, but they brought forth the theory that if, let's just say this, let's say you have two groups of people, and one was raised with the understanding that murdering somebody is a bad thing, but then the other group of people were raised with the attitude that murdering people is a good thing. And now, it's all spiritual things aside, I'm going to be pretty concrete with the actual thought experiment here. And it was something they were questioning, is this person who was raised from the get-go to think something that the normal human population sees as bad or sees as something that you don't do, but they were raised in the opposite to think that this is something good to do, that this is something just to do. Does that make the concept of good and bad an objective or a subjective thing? And this is something that has been talked about in philosophical circles for a while. Is the human being inherently evil or inherently good as well? And at least on my end of things, I do think that the human being is inherently good natured.
Yeah, I agree.
It is ignorance. It is ignorance that breeds the fear, the hatred, the doing of bad things. And is the ignorance self-prescribed? In my eyes, a lot of ways it is. The ignorance can be self-prescribed because we have the ability now to enrich ourselves, gain this knowledge, and have this understanding. We live in a world right now where we have access to information at our fingertips that we didn't in the past. And I even kind of brought up this analogy, even kind of going into the spiritual stuff that I talk about. The reason why spiritual awakenings, would take lifetimes back in the early days is because you had to travel by like 2 to 3 months on boat just to get to this one place. And then when you got to this one place, then you would have to maybe do a 2-week hike through a mountainous plateau just to get to this one temple to read this one book that you were trying to get your hands on. And then, fast forward today where we have access to all of these books at the tip of our fingertips. So, yes, I do think the human being is inherently good. It is the ignorance that breeds the fear, the hatred, and a lot of the bad doings of humanity. And that also comes into question too. Like, we see a lot of people who follow orders in this society, right? And we see a lot of people who do what they're told and they think that is the morally good thing to do. But then this is where we get into a little bit of the exterior and the metaphysics of it all as well. If you are a human being and you have the awareness and the knowledge to understand and differentiate between what is right and wrong, and you are following an order that is morally wrong, that you shouldn't be doing because it either hurts somebody else or it takes from somebody else. And, we know that if something hurts or takes from anybody else, we, all four of us here, know that that's a bad thing, right? Like, that's not a good thing to be doing. So really at that point, is that individual following the order a good person or a bad person? And that's something we have to think about. So really, like, I'll digress and I'll even get back to what you were saying about the coercion a little bit. It's what you're doing is like it's persuading them. It's persuading them to do the right thing. It's persuading them to be on the right path. You're not forcing them to be on the right path. And of course, even though you guys are dealing with children, ultimately even children have free will of their own, to kind of go forth and, experiment with their life and learn through these lessons. And I see where you're coming from, Kyle, as a teacher, trying to steer these kids in the right direction. But the best piece of advice I could give to you is, to really focus on the kids that want to be doing the right direction, that want to improve their lives. But
and beyond that, just like being a good role model, Cody we didn't become teachers until we were I was 29 years old. So I didn't really feel like up until then I was like exactly a good role model for, and that goes into a whole thing that me and Cody made an episode about that. Unfortunately, because of my professional situation, I'm not really allowed to divulge a whole lot about what happened during my 20s. Yeah, I became a teacher when I was like 29 years old. And beyond like just coercing them or like convincing them to be a good person, like it's just being a good person, like setting the example, being the person that they can look up to.
absolutely. And I get what you're saying.
I think
But
for the sake of this conversation, the term coercion should maybe be replaced by persuasion, because we all like
there
the
you go.
term persuasion, and coercion maybe has this connotation of force, which is maybe what we don't want forceful coercion. We want non-forceful coercion. So let's call it persuasion.
Yeah.
I really
Andrew, go
like
ahead. Yeah.
I really like that reframing, and I don't want to get into a super nerd out diatribe on the topic, but we're kind of touching on game theoretics and how that influences the way people interact. And I would encourage you to look at game theoretics and
I did.
okay, yeah.
The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I looked at their game theory entry. So yeah.
And so, both parties, yeah, we won't get into it or now, but that's what I'm seeing. And one more quick thing, not attacking you directly, but this is an observation I've made about progressive ideology, is that it is resistant to things like structure, boundaries, and hierarchy, which are things that children actually need. And so, on a very deep subconscious level, there might be a conflict there that makes you see the way you interact with these kids as coercive instead of what a masculine man is meant to do.
I kind of feel like that's a straw man. Do you want to get into that, Cody?
No.
Well, like the idea that like leftists don't enjoy organization and structure. Like I wake up at 4:30 every day and make sure my grade book is ready. No, okay.
I not you. I'm saying the left. And
okay.
I specifically said progressive ideology.
Yeah.
And we could go further. The postmodernists who literally desire to deconstruct everything. Like you even earlier said,
Yep.
Let's deconstruct. You used the word deconstruct.
Aren't anarchists against those things? And that's what, like, I like anarchy. And the thing I wanted to bring up to keep the conversation going, and sorry if this is boring, Andrew, but it's a compromise that I have, and it's everyday anarchism. And I want to know if you guys know about this, because it's like what I try to do. And I saw this quote that was awesome, and it was by a woman, and she was like, the most anarchist thing I do is doing things slow. And I was like, oh, damn, that's good. Yeah. Because it reminded me of Steven, slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, also too, one of the biggest things, I mean, if we're talking everyday anarchism, anarchism is more than just at least in my eyes, a political philosophy. It is also a way of being. It's the way that you coordinate yourself in this existence with others. And it is also it's an embodiment of the philosophies and the principles, because this is a pet peeve of mine that I see a lot of nowadays. Is we see a lot of people just talking about things and not actually embodying them and putting them into action. So, I mean, what would everyday anarchism look like to me? Everyday anarchism would look like, number one, sovereignty, the first thing. And what does sovereignty mean? It means that you let nothing rule you. All right. You develop your own perspective and your own ideology and your own vision for your world based on the best information that suits and works with you. As far as anarchism goes, anarchism is very much about community and the people in your community. So that would mean having a respect, a code of honor almost in the people that you deal with on an everyday basis, whether you're dealing with them out in everyday life, or you're dealing with them as your neighbor. And it's really not letting anybody dictate or have a rule over you and your thoughts and your opinions and your ideologies. So, I mean, the number one thing we can see in today's world on both the left and the right is we see there's a complete rule over the ideology. There's a complete rule over these people's emotions and how they function based on who is sitting in the Oval Office. They allow these exterior circumstances to dictate the outcome of not only their emotions, but their overall mental well-being. when it comes to life. I mean, this is what we see from both sides of the bipartisan system. So this is, Andrew and I both, and I know I can speak for Andrew on this because Andrew and I have had this conversation before. We understand that the greater collective at this point in time is not morally, ethically, emotionally ready for a complete and total anarchist system. Like we understand that, you know what I mean? Because when we look at, this is where it all ties down. Like I was talking about how it all ties down into human nature, human psychology, and things like that. When we look at the psychology and the nature of the human being right now, we can see most certainly that they aren't ready for something along those lines. But anarchism, like, well, yes, it is a political philosophy. It's also a way of being, and it's also how you coordinate.
I agree.
You conduct yourself, with the people that surround you in your community, and how you don't let anything happen. The biggest anarchist motto is no masters, no slaves, right? And some say no gods. The only God that I have that is an authority to me is the number one divine, the all is mind. That is the only thing. But then again, too, that's not a religion. That's an embodiment. That's a way of being as well.
Well,
That's a way that you function. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at with it. Like, if you want to know what everyday anarchism is, I can sum it up in 3 words: sovereignty, discernment, community, honor, living by your own internal moral code of honor on a day-to-day basis. And that's kind of how I would sum it up. I mean, it's like we can get into the logistics of everything for sure on the natural law and other things like that if you want, but that's what everyday anarchism is. It's not even just about being slow. It's about being a sovereign person. It's not letting any ideology, any narrative, have rule over you, and you have attachment to it.
well, if I can interject, the everyday anarchism is sort of helping me reconcile the reality of globalization and the struggle of like making anarchism scalable.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel like everyday anarchism is sort of a solution to that problem, because it doesn't necessarily need to be scalable. Like what anarchism looks like for you, and you can be different, and we should probably all be pursuing it.
Yep.
Go ahead, Andrew.
No, I liked where you were going with that, and that it's not that it's scalable, it's that it is a fractal sort of iteration. So you know how fractals, oh man, I can see it. But nope, I'm gonna stop. Y'all take over.
No. So you were talking about the fractals. Go ahead. I'm curious to hear you, if you don't mind.
Well, so the fractal mathematics, where it creates images that are similar but different, and then over time it's dramatically different, but then it comes back to what it originally intended to look like. That's what anarchism is that it's you apply it in different ways in different areas, and it's
Absolutely.
interpreted so differently that how I see it is that different groups of people will just sort of gather and create their own little versions of it, little pockets of it. And so, yeah, that's what I see.
Because gathering itself is anti-anarchism. Like
Again,
getting together.
But it's not.
Right.
Well, why don't you? Why don't you tell us what anarchism is?
Thank you, actually, because I think Stephen did a good job of not just analyzing everyday anarchism, but how it like applies to himself. And so I don't struggle around this idea because I want to be a bigger part of my own community. But I think anarchism is very individualistic, and
Yeah.
I don't think that about a lot of things. I think most things are very communal. Um, but and I think that's what everyday anarchism is how it is for you personally.
Well, and exactly, but it's not that anarchists are against gathering per se. That's kind of a gray area as well. What really, if we're talking about what you guys are saying, it would be against any kind of governmental or governing organization. So that's what that's about. And but then again, too, like I said, I was saying, like, I, of course, like, my personal philosophy is anarchism, but do I understand at this point in time that, like I said, where this collective is not morally, ethically, or emotionally ready to handle a system like that. But that doesn't mean there isn't something better that we can be doing right now. I
You gotta
mean,
try, man.
and,
You
and
just gotta try, right? Everyone's gotta try at least a little bit
well,
every day.
it's definitely, you got to try, but it's also too, you have to, I mean, I think being a sovereign person needs to stand outside of anarchism as well, because I mean, we see so many people who are just so grossly and gravely manipulated today by false narratives. And even when I had the show Common Ground on my channel, one thing that there's a lot of things that really came to light. The first thing that came to light was that these issues that the parasite class divides people up amongst, like, these issues that divide the right and the left. um these issues are not black and white. These are not black and white issues. Okay, these are gray issues, and there's a lot of different variables. There's a lot of different things, perspectives that people don't look at. And a lot of people fall into these falsehoods from this narrative that's being propagated into our society. Also, on top of that as well, all right, the other thing we saw too is that really the division in this world is an illusion. Because when I was sitting there I was talking to two parents, okay, two people that cared about children, all of this, okay. So what I'm getting at here is, sovereignty needs to be something that everybody practices in this world, and it's not just an everyday anarchist thing. Because I mean, let's just bring this up real quick. Let's talk about 2020. From what I heard, in 2020, there's a lot of people who got manipulated into the narrative. I saw that as well. And there was a lot of ostracization of people as well who didn't go along with that narrative. And the number one thing I'm going to say is, I mean, you guys state that you have this progressive ideology, right? And that's where you guys, gather a lot of your thought processes from, and I can understand that. But at the same time, based on everything, don't you think there's something better that we could be doing now, aside from repetitively just shoving a square peg into a circle hole? I mean, that's kind of the what we've been doing here in America, because it's all we know. I mean, in real life, do we continuously shove a square peg into a circle hole because it's all we know? No. We actually reach for the right peg, and we stick the right peg in the right hole. We don't just continuously try to shove the square peg into the circle hole. All right, because this is what we've been doing for the past 200 and some odd years. Okay, we have to at some point, bring that sovereignty into play and have the realization that there is something better than what we're doing right now.
I want to talk, but I want to also give you two a chance to talk. But I just want to say this real quick, maybe actually, while wrapping all of that up. You two are clearly open-minded and seeing new things and looking for new ways to see the world. You're experiencing cognitive dissonance. Um, those of us in the spiritual community, spiritual world, we're coming out of deep, deep, dark pockets of cognitive dissonance. And so I just want to tell you, don't run from it, but lean into it, because it's all connected. I want to bring up the anarchism real quick. There are sort of two main camps of anarchism, and it's so hilarious because they're so diametrically opposed. There are anarcho-communists, and then there are anarcho-capitalists. They both say they believe essentially in a free society, but the anarcho-communists believe that we must first have a literal communist revolution before we can then let the state, and these are Karl Marx's actual words, the state will wither away because it won't be necessary anymore. So these neo-Marxists who exist on the left side of the culture war, who have befriended and utilized and used progressives and liberals to further their influence and agenda, they want the government to take control of everything. And the ruling class loves that they have this group of useful idiots to make it easier for them to implement their insane plans. Anarcho-capitalists believe that the state is in fact the root of 90% of our problems and that it doesn't need to wither away, we need to dismantle it. This is where the coercion, force, what do you believe, how do we accomplish a stateless society comes in. Through force or through persuasion and through exchange and through sovereign actions. I see that you're open-minded, and I know it's going to be really hard to potentially let go of friends because you will likely lose friends if you continue down this path. I promise you, you will. To bring up what Stephen mentioned in 2020, if you do continue down this path, you'll have to look back and put yourself in my shoes. And it's going to potentially suck. But I'm here still, and I forgive you. And I'm willing and wanting to move on. I truly want to build a better world. And I'm not always eloquent, but I do believe that the non-forceful anarchist path is the way forward. And it's going to suck to lose friends. But I would just encourage, yeah.
Well, I co-sign what he's saying, and the reason why I co-sign it is because the biggest thing that we can do for ourselves to live a truly happy life is to live in our authenticity. You know what I mean? And when we live in our authenticity, and we're exploring these new avenues of life and we're exploring these new viewpoints, we're ultimately going to change. And, and what happens throughout that change is you're going to come to find that a lot of the people whom you thought were your friends, they were only friends with you on a superficial level. They were only friends with you on a superficial basis. And that's because when you embark down this path of evolution, whether it be, whether you end up going down the same evolutionary path that we've gone down, or you end up going on your own, that's completely up to you. But what's going to happen is as you have these new remembrances and realizations, you're going to find that it's going to change who you are. You know what I mean? It's ultimately going to change who you are from the inside out. And, you know, as you change and your perspective changes, your world's going to change too. So, and I mean, I really appreciate the fact that you guys have been broadening your horizons. You've been looking into new things and you've been exploring these different avenues in your life. And I mean, that's an amazing thing. And that's something that's worth the praise, you know. But one of the biggest things about this too is you're going to live in your authenticity, and you're going to come to find that when you live in your authenticity, there's a lot of people who are going to stop being friends with you. And you know, one of the biggest questions a lot of people ask when it comes to this is why. You know, are these people not being friends with me anymore? Because number one, what you're doing is you're basically becoming a mirror to them. You're starting to embark on this path of your evolution, this self-improvement, right? And you know, you're educating yourself. You're becoming well versed in the way the world works, the mechanics of this existence, and all of that. And a lot of people can't handle that, you know. And right now, you know, you guys are you're on a path to this understanding. You guys are, you know, kind of going through and reworking yourselves, and that's a great thing. But you know, you will definitely come to a point where you're going to notice that your world's going to change too, and that's going to be some of the friends that you had are probably not going to be around anymore. It's just a fact of it. And you know, this even dives into the Smith effect, you know. And I don't know if you guys have heard me talk about this before.
I don't know anything about the Smith effect, so sorry.
You're good.
Can we move on?
Yeah, we can move on. That's fine.
Kyle, do you want to go, or are you going to let me go?
The only thing I wanted to say is that responding to Andrew, sorry, but like we have, you know, Cody and I done a little bit of deep dive into anarchism lately, and the thing is, I really feel like it's pretty reductive to say that like anarchism can be understood as anarcho-communism and ANCAP. Like there's just so many other kinds of anarchism. But what I will say is I actually, Andrew, however boring you might think it would be, I think we could have a great conversation where we went through Rothbard's Anatomy of the State, but also I'm reading Proudhon and Kropotkin, and these guys are like staunch anti-capitalists. So I'm just kind of wondering like how that rubs you guys.
Because they're anarchists. Yeah.
And you just seriously Google it. Was Kropotkin an anti-capitalist? Was Proudhon anti-capitalist? Yes, they were. Were they the fathers of anarchism? Yes, they are.
All right, cool. If you don't mind, I'd like to just get this out of the way. So in a recent email communication, I asked Andrew to unblock me on Instagram, and you did a good job explaining of why you didn't want to do that. I understand keeping certain spaces for certain things. I've told you about this, and so I understand that completely. But you mentioned in that email about me playing a role in you being ostracized from a friend group. And the reason I'm curious is because we aren't really friends. We don't have any mutual friends, and we've never had any mutual friends. So I don't know what group of people I could have helped you feel ostracized from.
Well, first off, man, let me just say this. You know, you did decide to cut pretty deep on him when you decided to get really
he
started
started
in the chat of my show. But
he
here's
started
the,
it. And did you talk to him about calling us butthurt?
Well, I saw that, and you know, what basically what well, at the same time, man, you know, it's like, it's still though, guys, like you can't, I mean, you can't be he said you were butthurt in a joking sense, but to kind of cut him deep like he did with the insults, saying that our homeless living in a van, a non-employed acquaintance. So my question is, what kind of benefit does that do to you guys' evolution?
What kind of benefit does it do to have a video where you label the left as retarded, insidious, or ignorant?
Well, I mean, here's the thing, guys. People are given the opportunity in life to rise above the stereotype, right?
True.
And it seems time and time again that the left really just likes to meet the stereotype, at least from the mainstream point of view. And I'm not saying the right doesn't meet the stereotype either. The right does an excellent job of meeting their own stereotype for sure. But that's where he's coming from on it. I mean, let's just give this give this a good case in point, right? Here's the example. The left is really upset about Elon being in the possession he's in, right? Well, if most people on the left actually did the research, they would see that in 2012, Obama put forth the executive order that would allow somebody like Elon to get into the possession that he did. So you would think common sense applies in this situation, that you would be upset at the individual who made it so for this to happen, as opposed to being upset that this just happened. Okay.
Thank you. I didn't know that. I am upset.
Again, I didn't know that about Obama, and there's a lot of things that
things.
I'm finding out about Obama that I don't like.
Well, that's good. That's good that you're
Supporter in chief.
Well,
Obama.
that's good. But that's good. You're starting to see that. But here's the thing too.
He's gay.
Is the other thing about the left too, and this is actually something the right doesn't do. If we're going to dive into this, the left is very much caught up in the emotional here and now. They do not look at the repercussions of their decisions and their actions a good 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And I think the biggest thing I can bring up with that is the whole gun control debate when it comes to the left. Because here's the thing, guys, all right? So let's talk about the war on drugs for a second. We made
It's related to the gun thing.
Yes, this is leading into this. So
can I just make it? I want to.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew. We're going to say yeah.
I just want to say that the last 5 minutes was absolutely hilarious. I feel like I was sent back to my childhood for a minute.
You're welcome.
We were talking. I heard Kropotkin and Rothbard mentioned, and it was like, wow, this is so like deep. And then all of a sudden, minutes later, I literally heard he started it. He started it. That was so funny to go from like one level to a whole nother level that quickly.
But as I was saying, so this is my whole thing. But yes, this ties in with the gun control debate. So you look at the war on drugs. So what happened when we made drugs illegal, right? You opened a really large criminal underworld black market for drugs, right? And now the people that you really didn't want having drugs had an even easier access to the drugs. Okay. And now what happened was, instead of drugs being regulated and legalized on a market where they could be sold in a way to guarantee purity, you have a lot of this black market cutting going on, people dying nonetheless. But is also what's going to happen with guns. And it's going to happen on a much larger scale. So if you were to make any form of guns illegal or hard to obtain, okay, because here's the deal. The Second Amendment isn't just about hunting. It's not about the right to bear arms. It's also the right to protect against a tyrannical government. Okay. And if you make firearms illegal or you take firearms off of the table, all right, what's going to happen is you're going to open a massive, and I mean a massive underground criminal enterprise, even bigger than there already is, for guns. And then the people that you don't want having guns, like children and people with hardcore mental issues, have an easier access to said guns. And also on top of that, too, let's go back to the human nature, the human psychology, and the psychology of governments. The left seems to be completely fine with authority having guns, such as the police and the government, but the left is not okay with the average person having a firearm or a firearm that is capable
Love guns.
Yeah, you're just speaking to the wrong people right now, because I literally bought a gun yesterday. I went to a gun show.
Well, this is no. I'm not saying you. Again, I'm not saying you. I'm not saying you guys. I'm saying the left.
The left
in general. The left in general.
Consistently group us into that.
I'm not grouping you into that. That's not even what I said. Okay, I'm just going off on this one thing. But that's what I'm getting at, man. You look at you have to look at the long-term repercussions of these actions as well. You need to look at, what is this going to cause 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. All right. And you have to take a look at that. And that's just one thing I don't see the left doing. You know what I mean? But Andrew, do you have anything you want to add, or are you good over there?
No, I'm good. We can go back to anarchism, or I don't know.
I don't know. I know, right? It's kind of going all over the place, but
Steven, I think you have some good ideas about how important like the Second Amendment is. Not just, again, like you said, it's not about hunting, but at the same time, like, you can't go buy a tank. You can't buy a flamethrower,
Well, who can afford, like,
well, you
buy a
you
tank and operate it? Like,
you can do that, but you most certainly can, but
I thought there was some kind of regulation in place to where a regular average American citizen couldn't buy a tank. That's something.
Look at the guy. You can build a tank. Look at the guy in Granby that did it. He built,
or a flamethrower. You can make a flamethrower.
Yeah. So you can make your own flamethrower.
Shout out Marv.
I've been to that town in Colorado. Have you, Stephen? Yeah.
Granby. Granby. I've been to Granby. Yes, I have.
Grand Lake is right. It's called Grandview. There's the town, and Grand Lake is right next to it. Yeah.
No, he's saying Granby. Granby's a different place. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, Granby is the town that it actually happened in. Grand Lake is near Granby. Yeah. So
sorry.
No. So I've been there. No, it's a beautiful place. I absolutely love this state, man. I
love Denver. I could never say a bad word about Denver. I love that place. Yeah. Love Denver. Love Denver.
The only thing I dislike about here, man, is just is what's going on with some of the laws they're trying to pass. So
actually, I had a question for you, and it's more of like a thought experiment around like the gun control idea. And so this is something I've thought about because so like I drive a fast car, and my fast car is honestly dangerous as the pistol that I keep under my pillow. And so like we regulate the shit out of driving and having a vehicle and everything like that. I think there might be a way to do common sense regulations around some firearms. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, I have my guns and no one's coming to take them because this is America.
And I'm lucky that I'm biased on my state politics. Again, like I went to a gun show yesterday, and that was the thing is like there's licensed dealers there, but then there's unlicensed sales people there too. Like, yeah, so it's just I kind of like I'm lucky that I live in a state where I actually like the laws that are going. I kind of like what's going on with my state politics.
Pennsylvania is an open carry state, for Christ's sake. I've seen a guy walking down his driveway with his pistol in his back.
Yeah, so are we.
Well, it's this is the thing, you know, when it comes to regulating firearms, we're dealing with a whole different ball game than we're dealing with vehicles. And I know there's a lot of people who think, you know, a vehicle is a guided missile. I've heard that saying before. But when
It doesn't cause.
What were you going to say? Go ahead.
I don't think there are as many deaths due to vehicles, and so like that kind of proves your point in itself, in that vehicles are just a little bit more. And so we are able to regulate them because they're easy to regulate. Is, I think, something.
We're dealing with something that's kind of like on a case by case thing. I mean, you know, like the number one thing I would say is this is, you know, a gun never hops up out of its case, goes up to somebody and goes, I don't like you, I'm going to kill you, and then fires itself off and then shoots somebody. You know what I mean? We're dealing with something on an individual basis. But the other thing too, as well, man, I mean, anything can become a weapon. If we're looking at it that way, anything can become a weapon. But the issue with regulating guns is, like I said, we have the psychology of governments. Okay, let's bring that into play. You know, look at every single nation right now that has regulations on guns, and look at when it comes to what's going on with their freedoms. Look at what's going on when it comes to their sovereignty. I mean, let's even take case in point. Let's take places like New Zealand and Australia. All right. Especially during 2020. And
strict gun laws.
Very, very strict gun laws. And they basically have their way with their citizens in a lot of the legal processes and things like that. So, you know, we're dealing with something that's a case by case. You know, you cannot take the whole gun control issue and make it a black and white thing.
And I think it has a weird connection to
voting. Did you guys know that? Yeah, that's kind of.
What'd you say?
Australia has mandatory voting. You like how you could get fined for not having health insurance under Obama. It's literally the same thing. In Australia, you can get fined if you don't vote.
So that's where the sovereignty, I think, comes into play that Stephen was saying. And that's why, not unfortunately, the fact is having the right and able to like bear arms is like a key tenet to having personal sovereignty.
Yeah, to protect yourself.
Exactly. Right. And others, protect yourself and others. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Ideally. All right, guys, it's actually late my time. And
okay.
Not only that, but Stephen, I think, is going to be generous enough to host us, so we can talk about whatever we think we missed, and maybe something new. If we want to do that, we can talk about that as well.
Awesome, man. Well, you know, thanks for having us on. I appreciate it. And yeah, I look forward to our chat on the 28th.
All right. Cool. So with that being said,
knowledge is power, and let us know. We will talk later. Thanks, guys.
Take care.